everyone, welcome back to the Spirit of Prophecy podcast. And as always, we are excited about today's program. We have a very special guest that is going to be with us today, Pastor Chuck Baldwin of the Liberty Fellowship in Kalispell, Montana. He's been on the program 2 other times before. This is his 3rd appearance on the Spirit of Prophecy podcast, and he is always a favorite on the program. It's been a long time since we've talked to him. He has been in our prayers. He's been having some different health battles and things, and looking forward to getting an update from him on that. But keep him in your prayers, and if you have not checked out any of his preaching, I'll leave a link to his website and his YouTube page, and I highly recommend you go listen to his preaching, especially his stuff on prophecy. He will challenge you on your position, and always has some very interesting insight. And I like hearing what he has to say, even politically, because he's somebody who's been involved in politics before, ran for president in the Constitution Party several years ago. And so I love hearing his perspective on these different things. And so what we're going to do today, we are going to talk to him, and I just want to kind of get his opinion and his perspective on things concerning the new Donald Trump administration, and especially how it's going to affect our relationship with Israel and our involvement in that country, the advancement of the Zionist agenda. And if you watch this program at all, you know that we are very opposed to Zionism on this program for many reasons. I'm against it politically, but I'm especially against it biblically. And it just seems to me, from my perspective, that probably a vast majority of the motivation of Zionism today, it comes more from Christians than it actually does from Jews. It comes from a bad theology amongst Christians, and Baptists are no exception to this. And so before we get Pastor Baldwin on the phone and talk to him and kind of get his perspective, I just want to point out a couple things that I've been hearing about, that I've noticed, that have me concerned, and I want to get his perspective on it. And so these are the things that got me interested in the subject, and also wanting to hear what he had to say about it. But Trump's appointments. Okay, now obviously I am thrilled that we're not getting Kamala in the White House and we're getting rid of Biden. Of course, I believe Trump is better than them in my opinion. However, when it comes to Zionism, I do believe that Trump is on the wrong side, as is all of our politicians. And it's amazing the amount of criticism Biden even got from the Democrats, who are very opposed to Zionism. And I hate to sound like a Democrat, but there's a reason. Their motivations are different than mine, and I'm not going to get into all that today. But so since Trump has won the election, we've been hearing a lot about his nominations to different things, and some of the people I find compelling and interesting and even excited about. But a couple names have concerned me, especially because of the fact that I know just these people are hardcore Zionists. And some of you, when I negatively speak of these people, it's going to really upset you. But my problem with them is their Zionism. Okay, I completely disagree with them on this. They might be fantastic, wonderful people in other areas, but at the same time, when it comes to Zionism, they are wrong. And I believe their motivation for Zionism is a misunderstanding of the Bible. And the first one that I've heard about the nomination, and a lot of Christians were excited about it, was Mike Huckabee. Now, I want to read this article to you. I can't vouch for this website, this individual, but I did want to read this to you. But this is from The Atlantic by Yair Rosenberg. Now, what kind of religion or ethnicity do you think he is? But he said the real reason Trump picked Mike Huckabee as ambassador to Israel. Mike Huckabee is definitely loved by Baptists and loved in the evangelical world, and for sure is a hardcore Zionist. It says on Tuesday, Donald Trump announced that he would be nominating former Arkansas Governor Mike Huckabee to serve as his ambassador to Israel, a Baptist minister. Huckabee is both familiar with the region and a vocal player in its many controversies. He has led religious pilgrimages to Israel and visited the country dozens of times over the course of several decades. He also opposes a two-state solution to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, says that there really no such thing as Palestinian, and advocates permanent Israeli control over the occupied West Bank, which Palestinians claim for their future state. Now, I don't know if most people realize what these people are saying. When they say that they are against a two-state solution, there's no such thing as Palestinians, in a sense, what they are calling for is the extermination of the Palestinians. You say, well, they're not saying that. And boy, do we get offended if they say that about the Jews. But that is what they're saying because of the fact that these Palestinians are not just going to pack up and leave. And that's what a lot of them are saying. They need, he said they need to go to Egypt or some of these other places. They are not just going to pick up and leave. They have religious motivation for being there too, and not even just religious motivation. It's been their home their whole lives and for generations and longer than the Jews in many cases. They're not just going to pick up and leave. It's the reality of the situation is if they are going to get rid of them, they're going to have to kill them. And so that's just the reality of it. And so if they're not going to leave, then you got to figure out some kind of livable solution between the two. But they're so opposed to each other politically and all these different things, it's probably not going to happen. When I say that they're opposed that much, I am speaking of the Zionists, not necessarily all the Jews. Because it appears too from this article, this Jew is not for Zionism, which is the case with most Jews. Let's look at a little bit more of this article and see what he says. He says these positions stand in stark contrast to those held by most American Jews. A Pew survey earlier this year found that 46% support a two-state solution, the highest proportion of any religious demographic. Just 22% support a single Israeli state in the entire land, as Huckabee does. Thus, though exceedingly unlikely to bring peace to the Middle East, Huckabee's appointment has one salutary effect. It makes clear what Trump's Israel policy is meant to serve, far from the product of some clandestine Jewish cabal, as anti-Semites might allege. It is a transaction meant to reward evangelical Christians who are among the president-elect's most ardent non-Jewish supporters. And so understand this writer kind of, he goes against this idea of some anti-Jewish conspiracy because it's Christians that are mainly behind this, not Jews. And that's what most Baptists don't understand. Most Jews are not Zionists. Only 22% want a single state solution. Most of them are for a two-state solution when it comes to the situation over there because most Jews are secular Jews and everything. But and even your Orthodox Jews are against that because they don't believe in killing people. It's just the Zionist ones. They are the ones that are behind a lot of the foolishness and the evil that is going on in government. And so, and what they have done, they have successfully gotten evangelical Christians on board with their political agenda. And so Mike Huckabee, the reason he doesn't see the possibility of a two-state solution is because he believes the land belongs to the Jews because of their bloodline, because of their ethnicity. And that's just wrong. And if you watch this program, you know that's wrong, and you know why that's wrong, and you can take a Bible and prove why that's wrong. But unfortunately, because most evangelical Christians have bought into John Hagee's foolishness and all this dispensational foolish and this pro-Israel nonsense, they are the most extreme supporters in this. And in my opinion, I've never felt like Trump seemed like he was a hardcore Zionist. I've always felt like he's just kind of throwing bones to the evangelicals to help him out. And so I was hoping in his re-election, he wouldn't really care. But boy, did he make the evangelicals happy with his choice of Mike Huckabee. Because Mike Huckabee, for sure, believes in Zionism, for sure believes in just everything going to Israel. And so that's very concerning to me. Another name, too, I haven't heard the latest. I've not been following the story real closely. But another individual who was nominated as Secretary of Defense, Pete Hegseth, he was actually, he worked for Fox News, interestingly enough. You talk about Fox News Baptists. But this guy actually worked for Fox News. Trump has picked him for Secretary of Defense. And look at this article here, Middle East Eye, but the next U.S. Defense Secretary, Pete Hegseth, called for building a Jewish temple at Al-Aqsa, which would also cause a major war, if I might add. But let's read more of this article. Donald Trump's choice as the next United States Defense Secretary has called for the building of a third Jewish temple on the site of the Al-Aqsa Mosque in Jerusalem. Pete Hegseth, a former TV show host, was picked by the incoming U.S. President Trump for the role following his election victory earlier this month. Hegseth has previously touted his avowedly pro-Israel credentials, which derive in part from his fundamentalist Christian beliefs. Speaking at an event in Jerusalem in 2018, said there was no reason why the miracle of reestablishing the temple on the Temple Mount isn't possible using the Israeli name for the raised plateau in occupied East Jerusalem where Al-Aqsa Mosque stands. He told attendees that Israel should take advantage of Trump being in office to do what they needed to do in the region because there were true believers in Washington who would back them. And there's Pete Hegseth back when he was working for Fox News talking to Trump. But this guy, Secretary of Defense, wants them to rebuild the third temple. That's how hardcore he is. And folks, that is a religious ideology that is false. That it's not right, it's not Christian, it's not good. And that's what is motivating this. It's not even that there's some kind of benefit to America politically. If Israel gets their way, it does not benefit America. But most Americans don't care because they think if we do good things for Israel, that we're going to be blessed because they don't understand Genesis 12. And if you don't understand that yet, go watch Pastor Baldwin's preaching on that subject because he can lay it out as good as anybody on the foolishness of that interpretation that people were there applying a modern day ethnic group and saying we've got to bless them to receive blessings of God. That is absolutely insane, and it is just flat out wrong. And so Trump's nominees are disturbing me very much when it comes to whether or not the Zionist agenda is going to be pushed forward. It's not looking good at all. So I want to hear Pastor Baldwin's perspective on that. I'd like to ask him too. I'm hoping to get to the subject of AIPAC. If you're not familiar with AIPAC, they are the American Israeli Political Action Committee. And they American Israeli Political Action Committee. They are very pro-Israel, and they are very influential. And they fund different campaigns and things. They help people get elected. And typically, if AIPAC backs somebody, they're going to win. And they have a lot of influence on our politicians. And I'm tired of seeing the Israeli government influencing our government to advance Israel's interests over our interests. I want representatives that are going to put American interests over Israeli interests. But most Americans today, no, they'll put Israel's interests over America's because of a false ideology. And so we're going to get Pastor Baldwin on the phone and we're going to hear what he has to say. So let's hear from Pastor Baldwin.
Pastor Tommy.
Pastor Baldwin, how are you doing?
I'm doing well. How are you, sir?
I'm doing very good. Very good. It's very good to speak to you again. I've been praying for you. How's your health doing?
Oh, my health was fine.
Excellent.
The health was never really the issue. The issue was my voice.
Okay.
So how does it sound to you?
It sounds good. Yep.
Okay.
Coming through real clear. Well, I definitely appreciate you taking a call and being willing to come on the podcast again. I always enjoy hearing from you and your perspective on things. And so I guess to just kind of get right into it, what are your thoughts on the new Trump administration? Is this going to change everything for the good? What do you think?
Well, I would like to think that it would change everything for the good. I'm not that optimistic. I really believe that Donald Trump is a flawed individual, and I do not believe that he is, first of all, his own man, as almost no president is. They are all bought and paid for by the donor class.
Mm.
And in this particular president, he owes his political soul to the Israeli lobby, to the billionaire Jewish Zionists who have financed his campaign, such as Miriam Edelson, who's given over $100 million to Trump's campaign, as she did in 2016. Well, I should say her husband, Sheldon, did in 2016. He passed away since then. So Miriam owns the estate. She is a Israeli citizen and a committed Zionist. And in 2016, the $100 million contribution came with the strings that Donald Trump, as president, would move the capital, move the embassy, U.S. embassy to Israel from the capital of Tel Aviv to Jerusalem, which, of course, he did. He also gave Israel the Golan Heights. He also promised Miriam Adelson that he would further extend the borders of Israel, which he did. And so this man has already proven in his first administration that he is a Zionist, bought and paid for. And, unfortunately, I would like to say that he's, the exception to the rule. But he's not. The vast majority of our congressmen are owned by AIPAC and the Israeli lobby, and they vote according to the AIPAC agenda almost 100% of the time. So we do not have a government in Washington, D.C. that is looking out primarily for the interests of the American people. Sadly and tragically, they are paying homage to their political masters, which are the political lobby groups. So I'm not very optimistic about Trump's second administration.
Yeah, and something in observing Trump, I think one of the appeals he has, he's very entertaining. He does seem to wear his agenda on his sleeve, and I've never really thought of him as like a Zionist figure. I've never really felt like he personally cares that much for it. But at the same time, some of the moves he's make have been so pro-Zionist, which at first, like when he moved the embassy to Jerusalem, I felt like he was just trying to throw a bone to the evangelicals. But I agree. Since then, I've learned about things like AIPAC and a lot of these big funders, and I had high hopes that going into his second term, he wasn't going to care as much about all that stuff. Because I just don't think he personally cares that much about it. But after seeing his appointments he's been making, men like Mike Huckabee to be ambassador to Israel, some of the things that he says that are very concerning to me, Pete Hegseth, who wants a third temple to be rebuilt, it shows me, man, he is really, going all in, I think even more on this administration than the last one. What do you think about some of these appointments he's made?
Well, I think the appointments that you point out are more evidence of the extremity of Trump's Zionism. Now, let's not forget that Donald Trump, in his first term, brought his son-in-law, Mr. Kirshner, into his team. Kirshner is a very high-level Shabbatist, Kabbalist, Zionist, and he had a lot of influence in Trump's first administration. He married Trump's daughter, Ivanka, of course, and one of the conditions of their marriage was that she would convert to Judaism. Well, that all sounds benign, but you have to understand that one cannot convert from a, quote, Christian denomination. They were raised, the Trump family, by nominal / liberal Presbyterianism. And they had no real theological convictions on the Bible whatsoever, but they had a nominal affiliation with the liberal side of the Presbyterian denomination. So when Ivanka was married to Jared, she had to take an oath that she would renounce Jesus Christ as her Savior and Messiah and as his Lordship and so forth in order to become a Jewish wife, which she did. And, there are reports, and I don't know personally how accurate they are. Rick Wiles did a broadcast back in 2019, and he presented documentary evidence in his broadcast back then that says, according to him, he has the proof that Donald Trump secretly became a Jew, that he converted to Judaism in 2019. Now, I cannot verify that, but Rick Wiles claims that is a fact. So the point I'm trying to make is I think that Mr. Trump has done a very good job of hiding his loyalty to Judaism and to Zionism from the American people. But I know what you're saying because he doesn't flout that. And as a result, most people don't really understand the involvement that he's had with Israel and the Zionist philosophy. Now, you brought up the appointments, which I think are a further proof of Mr. Trump's commitment to the Zionist cause. You remember that in 2016, Trump's campaign mantra was "Make America Great Again." Well, on the campaign trail in 2024, his campaign mantra was "Make Israel Great Again." I mean, he was all over the country using that cliche, "Make Israel Great Again." He said that numerous times, very, very publicly and very, very forcefully. So I think his appointments prove that he meant what he said. Mike Huckabee, of course, well known to be a hardcore Christian Zionist who truly puts the interest of Israel above the interests of the United States. Having Mr. Huckabee as the ambassador, U.S. ambassador to Israel, is really kind of a joke because really he's not an ambassador of the United States to Israel. He's an ambassador of Israel to the United States. And that's exactly the way he sees his position and the way he will conduct his office. But there are others that are even more problematic. You mentioned Pete Hegseth. This guy is really so far out there that it's really hard to describe this man. You mentioned the Third Temple. He has gone on record as saying that he has 3 sons, apparently. And he has said publicly several times that he has raised his 3 sons to go fight for Israel. Now, this is the man that's appointed to the Secretary of Defense. Now, our men and women, when they put on the U.S. uniform in whatever military branch it is, they take an oath to defend the United States of America. I don't think there's an American citizen anywhere, Christian or non-Christian, that expects that their sons and daughters and fathers and brothers and so forth who are wearing the American uniform are there to do anything except defend the United States of America. But this man has said that he wants, and he has raised his boys to go fight for Israel. Well, if this man is determined to put his sons in the uniform of the Israeli army and have them fight for Israel, he certainly would have no qualms to have all the other sons and daughters of the American people go fight for Israel as well. So this man is absolutely an Israel first individual who, as defense secretary, will put the military interest of Israel above the United States. And let's not forget how Hegseth became the nominee to that position. Trump's first pick was Florida Congressman Matt Gaetz. Now, Matt, representing the 1st Congressional District of Florida, is one of the very, very few congressmen of either party, forget Democrat and Republican, when it comes to the Israeli lobby. There is no difference. The vast majority of them are owned by the Israeli lobby in either party. Matt, however, was one of only a handful of congressmen and senators that was not on the payroll of the Israeli lobby. And I think this is very fascinating because as soon as Gaetz was named and it became public knowledge that he would be Secretary of Defense, Attorney General, the Israeli lobby went into a full attack mode, and they began to lobby the congressmen and the senators. And of course, I'm sure phone calls came from Israel itself. And within a matter of days, Gaetz withdrew his nomination. And then Trump picked Pam Bondi, or Bondi, however you pronounce it, to be Attorney General. Bondi is a rabid Zionist, a corporatist who has said publicly that she believes that anyone, including American citizens who protest against the genocide in Gaza, who protest the military atrocities of the Israeli government, should be deported from the United States. She's also very much in favor of the Project Esther movement, which was written by Christian Zionists. Basically, this project says that any group in the United States, and we're talking about American people, American citizenry, who have a right under the First Amendment to speak and to make their protestations known. That's one of the bedrock principles of America, is the freedom of speech. I mean, that the freedom of speech that we don't like. It doesn't matter whether that speech is politically correct or whether we like it or not. Every American has a right to speak in this country under our Constitution. So she's a part of this far-right extremist Christian Zionist movement that is in the Trump administration, who is serious, very serious about shutting down free speech in the United States of anyone who would criticize Israel or Netanyahu or the genocide or the ethnic cleansing or whatever they do. If you criticize it publicly, you'll have the FBI investigating you. You could be even subject to deportation from the United States. This is all a part of the Trump agenda, the Bondi agenda, the Sebastian Gorka agenda. Marco Rubio, Secretary of State, this guy is as radical a Zionist as it can possibly be. Mike Waltz, National Security Advisor, same thing. Christine Holm, Department of Homeland Security, same thing. Christie, when she was governor, well, she still is, of South Dakota, till she's sworn in. She signed a bill outlawing the freedom of speech in South Dakota against anyone who would criticize Israel, whether they were students on campus or businesses who would criticize Israel. Anybody who criticized Israel or the Netanyahu government was subject to civil penalties under the law passed in South Dakota, which she promoted and she signed as governor. So, I mean, we could go on and on. Elise Stefanik, the U.S. ambassador to the United Nations, is an absolute radical Zionist. You know, Judge Napolitano looked at all the appointments that Trump has made so far to his administration. And on his broadcast 2-3 weeks ago, he categorically stated that Trump's picks are 60% Jewish and 100% Zionist. Mm. Now, I don't know that to be true, but I'm accepting his word for that. But that's Judge Napolitano, who is very studious and very knowledgeable on these issues, as you know, and does a lot of research. Now, if that's true, 60% Jewish, the Jewish population in the United States is less than 2% nationwide, yet 60% of his cabinet picks, administrative picks, are Jewish. And then 100%, every single person he's appointed to his administration thus far is a committed radical Zionist. So I think people who believe that Trump was honest about wanting to make America great need to sit back and question the truthfulness of that, because he has done everything so far in his power to surround himself with nothing but rabid, radical, uber Zionists who are Israel first radicals. They care far more for Israel than they do the United States. I think this is very, very ominous for the new Trump administration.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree. And I guess what's fascinating to me about this and frustrating at the same time is, I mean, I'm not a political person. I'm a religious person, and I understand in government they have a certain agenda. They want power. They want to make alliances with other nations and things like that. But in some of the articles, I referenced an article before I got on the phone with you for the program that was actually written by a Jewish individual who was not Zionist, and he was showing in here that the Zionism in America seems like it's mostly fueled by evangelical Christians. And I do believe that men like Mike Huckabee, that his main motivation for Zionism is he's been duped on, dispensationalism and this, we've got to bless Israel if we want to be blessed as a nation. I don't believe most of our politicians are thinking that way. I think they see a political benefit for whatever reason, for whatever they're trying to advance, where guys like Mike Huckabee, I believe he thinks this is going to get the blessing of God on us. And so in your opinion, is this Zionist infiltration, was this more of a politics getting into a religion or a false religion messing up all our politics?
I would say the latter. Absolutely. We cannot underestimate the impact that dispensational futurism, as popularized by C.I. Scofield at the early part of the 20th century, has had upon the political climate of the United States government. We're over 76 years of this. This started even before Israel became a state in 1948. The push for Zionism was strong, back at the end of World War II. And Harry Truman bought and paid for Zionist lackey. And just about every president since Truman has been a bought and paid for Zionist lackey. We cannot underestimate the power of the Israeli lobby, which the most notable is AIPAC. But they're only one of scores of lobby groups that have hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars annually to use to bribe the members of Congress and presidential candidates. Most people don't really give this a lot of thought. They're not really tuned into how the political system works. But over the decades, we have become a donor-bought political system, unfortunately. I mean, you could add to that the industrial military complex, who has a lobby group that is extremely powerful, and the top generals and admirals of the military, when they retire from military service, the bulk of them will bounce over to the military industrial complex lobby groups, whether Boeing or Raytheon or whoever it is, and they become lobbyists for the military complex on Capitol Hill. So there's a lot of money that flows into Washington, D.C. from various lobby groups. Maybe that is generally known. But what is not specifically known is the tremendous influence by the Israeli lobby. Without any question, the Israeli lobby is the most powerful lobby group in Washington, D.C., bar none. I mean, nothing is close. Not even the military-industrial complex comes close to the power of the Israeli lobby. And the thing about this that is really so disgusting from an American / constitutional point of view is that these AIPAC-type groups are able to exercise this kind of influence, and they do so without having to identify themselves as foreign agents of the government of Israel. Every other lobbyist who represents a foreign entity of any kind is required under U.S. law to register as a foreign agent of that country, which obviously curtails their influence because they are publicly identified as an agent of whatever the country is, name it, London, Germany, France, etc. But the Israeli lobby is exempt from that requirement. They do not have to register as a foreign agent. So they do this undercover without having to file the paperwork, without having to be identified publicly in the media and by the American people as working for a foreign government. And yet that's exactly what every single lobbyist working for one of these lobby groups is doing. They are not representing the United States of America. They are representing Israel. They're lobbying for legislation on behalf of Israel. They're lobbying for individual candidates succeeding on behalf of Israel. I think there's a couple examples in 2024 during the congressional primaries. There were two Democrats who were very critical of the genocide in Gaza. And I mean, this is something that just blows my mind, Tommy, that we as Christians who say we are the disciples of the Prince of Peace, who preach so-called gospel of peace, who Jesus came to give men peace and peace on earth, goodwill toward men. The angels declared at his birth. There's so much hypocrisy here by these Christian Zionists who say they worship and serve the Prince of Peace, and yet they clamor for war and bloodshed and killing, and they cheer whenever innocent men, women, children, little babies are slaughtered by the tens and tens of thousands by a merciless, mad, genocidal Israeli army that has absolutely no conscience whatsoever of the value of human life, who view the Palestinian people as animals, and they publicly say that. And at the same time, they're supported by all these Christian Zionists. I mean, I struggle with this. I don't, in my heart, I believe that some of these people are truly saved. But then again, on the other hand, I have to say, how in the world could a truly saved person have absolutely no conscience to this degree, to the level that we are seeing take place? And we have this influence from the Zionist theology. Zionism is a political movement, of course, but they work under the cover of religion to sell themselves to the American people. And through the Schofield Reference Bible, the teachings of John Starby and the Dallas Theological Seminary and most of the college seminaries and campuses, universities on the Christian campuses are teaching Schofield futurism. This has had a tremendous, I could go into the history of my life, and I was there with the moral majority when Jerry Falwell. I graduated from Liberty University, the very first graduating class, 1975. I was with Jerry numerous times. I was the head of the moral majority in Florida. I traveled with him around the world, literally on his jet. I traveled with him in the United States on his jet. A jet, by the way, that I learned later was bought and paid for by the state of Israel, the government of Israel. I grew up in that environment. I was there when the religious right and the moral majority were the marriage partners of the Republican Party. I was there when that marriage took place in 1980 with Ronald Reagan. I saw it from the ground up, and the movement that began at that point entrenched Christian Zionism into the heart and soul, the very fabric of evangelicalism, to the point it grew, with people like Robert Jeffress and John Hagee and John MacArthur and all the rest of these Christian Zionists who have perpetuated the theology of Christian Zionism. And this has taken root not just in religion, not just in our churches, but that translates into votes. It translates into congressmen and senators. It translates into state legislators. It translates into state governors. The voting power of the evangelical world is massive. And over the decades, we're talking 70 years or more, over the decades, this has resulted in a Congress and White House of either party, it doesn't matter which party it is, that behind the scenes, no matter what they stand for, they can be liberal in social issues, they can be for abortion, they can be for the woke agenda, they can be for all that, or they can be pro-Second Amendment, pro-life, pro-legal immigration. They can have all the right credentials of the conservatives side, or they can have all the right credentials of the people on the left. And yet, the common denominator is all of them are going to support the Zionist Israeli agenda at all cost. And so that's what's happened. So I really believe that this is the legacy of Cyrus Schofield. What we are seeing happen in Gaza and the West Bank and Palestine, what we are seeing Israel doing right now, the bloodbath, the mass murder, unbelievable human atrocity, of starvation deaths of hundreds of thousands of innocent people, the absolute satanic war, death agenda of the Zionist government. That is the legacy of Cyrus Schofield, and the enthusiastic endorsement of that satanic activity by professing Christians who have this Zionist mentality. That's the legacy of C.I. Schofield. So that's really what I believe. This is a religious theological doctrine that has ingrained itself into America's political system, and they're carrying out the death agenda of Zionism through the political part of America, but it would never have happened, and it could not be sustained without the theology of Schofieldism behind it.
Yeah. Well, I agree. And I guess to just kind of close this out, I do think this war in Gaza, and people are seeing it, they're pretty horrified by it. It does seem that maybe on a small level there's been an awakening where I think I'm seeing more and more people who are realizing there's something wrong with this Zionist agenda. Do you think that this war in Gaza is going to keep being bad, going bad, or is it going to get better? Because it seems like it's waking people up. Do you think there's a chance of an awakening, or is it too late?
No. Well, it's never too late. When God is involved, and God is much more powerful than any Israeli special interest group or any human activity, as you know well. And I agree with you, and I've said this from my pulpit many times, that I believe that the demise of the state of Israel is inevitable. And I truly believe that. I believe that there will come a point when the state of Israel, the Zionists, I'm not talking about the Jewish people, I'm talking about the political entity, the state of Zionist Israel, will cease to exist. Whether that will come about via military action, or whether it will just be a self-implosion of the political system, such as happened in the Roman Empire and other countries before it, or not. I have no idea which way it'll happen or how long it will take to happen. But I may not live to see it, but I am convinced that the state of Israel's demise is inevitable. The world will wake up one day, and there will be no state of Israel on the map. It will be gone. A Palestinian state of some sort will take its place, and it might very well be a peaceful transition. It doesn't necessarily have to be a bloody transition. I don't know how all that's going to happen, Tommy, but I agree with you that what has happened in Gaza has awakened the conscience of people all over the world. But here's the sad part. It hasn't awakened the conscience of the church in America. It's hard to understand this, but unsaved people or people of other religions that we know are false religions are awakened in their hearts to the atrocities that have taken place with impunity. And their hearts are grieved, and they want it to stop. They are, people don't realize that for months and months, the Christians in Russia have been assembling in their churches every Sunday, praying and begging God to stop the slaughter in Gaza and the Middle East, and to avert global nuclear war. They have been doing this for months. How many churches do you know in the United States that are having mass prayer meetings asking God to stop the slaughter of innocents in the Middle East. How many churches do you know in the United States that are having massive prayer meetings asking God to spare the world of nuclear war? And yet this has been going on in the churches of Russia for months and months and months. Other countries around the world, in their own ways, are protesting, many of them by the hundreds of thousands. Collectively, if you put them all together, it would be millions and millions of people who are protesting in the streets of their governments, Capitol buildings, about the slaughter of innocents in Gaza. Where do you see? Well, we've seen them on some of the college campuses, thankfully, but look what happened. The federal government, quickly sent in police forces, National Guard, and in the land of the free, home of the brave, shut down the free speech of these college kids who were protesting on behalf of the Palestinian people. And let me take the time to go over here a few minutes, if it's okay.
Yeah, that's
and
fine.
explain to your audience that here's the problem. One of the problems. Christians have this false idea that everybody in Palestine is a Muslim, and that every Muslim is a terrorist, and every Muslim hates the United States, etc. Those are two very, very blatantly false perceptions. First of all, there are tens of thousands of Palestinians who are Christians. They love the Lord just like we do. They have Jesus in their hearts just like we do. They worship Him as Savior and Lord just like we do. They practice their Christian faith just like we do. In fact, I've been to Palestine. I've met hundreds and hundreds of Palestinian Christians. I've eaten in their homes. I've preached in their churches. I've fellowshipped with them in their public assemblies. I've talked with them one-on-one. I've had much exposure to the Palestinian Christian community in the Middle East. And Tommy, I've got to tell you, from the bottom of my heart, in all of my life, and I'm 72 years old, I have never met a more compassionate, humble, peaceful, Christ-honoring people than the Palestinian Christians. They put American Christians to shame, and that includes me. They're the most wonderful, sweetest people you will ever meet. These are the people that are being blown to pieces. These are the people whose children are the snipers of Israel, putting bullets through their heads for sport. These are the little girls and boys that are being bombed purposely by the IDF. I call it the ODF, their occupation, the Israel forces. They're not a defense force, they're an occupation force. And yet these are the ones that the Christians in America are cheering when they're killed, cheering when they're displaced. They have a coldness and a heartlessness toward our brothers and sisters in Christ. It's hard for me to not be emotional about this. We have I don't know how many Palestinian Christians that watch us online through Liberty Fellowship, our broadcast every Sunday are watched around the world, including in the Middle East. We have Israelis that watch my Sunday messages. We have Israeli Christians that came to Christ through watching our messages at Liberty Fellowship, and they communicate with me regularly. They are not Zionists. They know that Zionism is a cult. It's a cult of evil. It's demonic. It's satanic. They very much despise the Zionist government of Israel. And they love the Lord, and they're persecuted. I could tell you a story. One man wrote, and I read letters on Sunday from people around the world and around the country that watch. And I read a letter from a man in Israel who received Christ as Savior after watching one of our broadcasts. And he wrote to tell me about it. And he was telling all of his friends and all of his coworkers and family about the Lord, like any new Christian would automatically do. But in Jerusalem, if you're a Jewish Israeli and you convert to Christianity, as they call it, receive Christ as Savior, life is not pleasant for you at that point. They took this man, the soldiers of the IDF took this man, they beat him half to death, they threw him in a dirty jail, and they fed him barely, just enough to keep him alive, let him rot. He stayed there for I don't remember how many months, and then after he finally was released, he wrote, the point I missed there in that story is that I made the mistake whenever I read the letter of reading his name. I didn't read his last name. I just read his first name. But they were able, the authorities in Israel were able to find him. And he went through all of that beating and imprisonment as a result of them finding out because I read his first name, which I learned my lesson. I never read any names now from people that write out of the Middle East. But he's still serving the Lord, and he's still excited to be a Christian, and he writes on a regular basis, as do others. So Christians in America are totally without conscience relative to their Christian brothers and sisters that are in Palestine and in Syria. I mean, now that what's happened to Syria, say what you want about Bashar al-Assad, he was an Alawite Muslim, and the Alawites have a unique theological perspective, and the Sunni and Shia Muslims consider Alawite Muslims as being heretics. And the point is that as an Alawite Muslim, Assad had a different viewpoint about liberty when it comes to faith and religion. So in Syria, every religion had complete religious freedom in Syria under Assad. The Sunni, the Shia Muslims, the Jews, and the Christians all had total religious freedom in Syria. And Assad protected their religious liberty. They had no interference, no persecution whatsoever. It was truly a pluralistic state, politically and religiously. So the Christians in Syria have had, all these decades, have had complete freedom to practice their Christian faith. Well, now you've got an ISIS, Al-Qaeda, extremist, Muslim, jihadist group that we fought. We sent our soldiers, our military, in the war on terror to go fight al-Jani and his ISIS and Al-Qaeda terrorist groups. Thousands of our American military men and women died fighting him and his fellow jihadists. These are the beheaders. These are the ones that you either convert to their version of Islam, or you get your head chopped off, or you watch your family get their arms cut off, or you watch your wife and daughter get raped and then killed. These people are bloodthirsty, brutal, the most animalistic kind of human beings on earth. And these are the ones that we supposedly fought back in the early 2000s under G.W. Bush and the War on Terror. Well, now, this is the same man, the man who has a $10 million bounty on his head, dead or alive, put there by the State Department. This is the man, Al Jilani, who is now the de facto head of the Syrian nation. It was his ISIS, Al-Qaeda terrorists who were the ones that they were financed by the United States. They were financed by Israel. They were financed by Great Britain. They were financed by Turkey. They were the ones that, with the support of NATO and the United States, went into Syria and toppled the Assad regime. And Christians everywhere in America are cheering this. They're getting up in their pulpits and they're talking about this is the fulfillment of prophecy. This is God's will. You know, this is a glorious day. All these things, and now those dear precious Christian people in Syria are facing the most heinous, hideous, torturous deaths that we could ever possibly imagine. What they are going through right now. They're being beheaded, they're being tortured, they're being dismembered. They're having their entrails took. I mean, I'm sorry to be graphic, but you know, this is the reality of what Christian Zionism produces. This is the reality of what evangelicals are supporting, all in the name of prophecy, all in the name of the return of Christ, all in the name of Israel's God's chosen people, all in the name of building a third Jewish temple. All of that nonsense that they've been indoctrinated in for the last 76 years, and they've bought hook, line, and sinker, and they have become as fanatical, a bloodthirsty, warmongering people as anybody in the world. But to go back to your question, the young people of America, the college-age kids, the people under 30, they are not Zionist. They are of a completely different mindset in this country. And so here's the point. It may take 30 years, it may take 20 years for my generation to die out, like the generation in the wilderness of Moses. They couldn't go into the promised land until everybody in that generation died. That might be the case with us in America. There may have to be a generation or two of these Christian Zionists who've got to die out. And then these younger people growing up that are not ingrained in Schofieldism. They're not ingrained in Old Covenant theology. They're not ingrained in Christian Zionism. They are going to have a completely different outlook on Israel. And it's going to be reflected in the people they elect to Congress and to our political institutions, which over time would completely change the emphasis and the priority of our political system. So I think positively and enthusiastically, yes, I think there is change taking place. Yes, I do think that the destruction of the Zionist state of Israel is inevitable. I think it will take place. And when that happens, Tommy, I think the new covenant gospel of Christ, the true new covenant gospel of Christ, which is not being taught in the vast majority of America's evangelical churches, that New Testament, new covenant gospel of Christ will have an opportunity, again to be preached in this country. And who knows, we might even have a third great awakening in this country in another 20 or 30 years. That, I think, could be a very possible reality in the years to come, but it won't happen overnight.
Oh, no, that's good. And I definitely hope that's the case. And I appreciate you, being a voice of reason on this subject out there. And I definitely appreciate you coming on this program. It is always a blessing and encouragement to hear from you. And so keep up the good work, and thank you very much.
Thank you, Tommy, and the same to you, sir.
All right. Well, God bless, and you take care. We'll talk to you later.
Okay. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
God bless you.
Well, there you have it. Hearing it right from Pastor Baldwin. And I know there's so much that he said there that made your heads explode. And here's why. Because when it comes to our theology, we think we are Bible-believing Christians. But the reality is most people today, we're 21st century American Christians. And we have our thinking has been very influenced by political movements and by things like Zionism that are false. And a lot of what he said right there, too, about the possibility of Israel falling, that seems impossible to you. You know why? Because it doesn't fit your eschatology. And our eschatology, what it has done, even not just in the pre-trib world, in the futurist world, it's got us cheering for Armageddon is what it has us doing. And that is not right. We should not be excited about wars, encouraging wars. I mean, I heard a nut job pastor recently saying, he was hoping for Kamala to become the president just because it's like he wants to see judgment come on this country. People want to see the end times kick off, and they think if we let everything go to pot, then we're more likely to usher in the coming of Christ, depending on what their theology is. And folks, we should never be supportive of evil and war and death. It's so sad. And what must our testimony be with Christians in these Muslim countries? And, and then independent fundamental Baptists, there ain't no way those people's actually saved over there. They don't, worship like we do. They don't preach like we do. They don't act like we do. And again, so much of our Christianity is cultural, not necessarily even biblical. And it's just really amazing what we have allowed to happen in our 21st century American Christianity. And it started a long time ago. And it was interesting what he said about his generation and them kind of dying out before this happens. And just recently we saw Hal Lindsey died, who was greatly influential in people's thinking on end times, on politics, and he didn't get to see the rapture. He's gone. I think about guys like Tim LaHaye, gone. A lot of these big names out there, very influential, who are very much influential in promoting people into the Zionist ideology. They are dying out. And we need to hope and pray that this next generation can get these things right. And did you hear what he said about a talk of a third great awakening? Yeah, that seems impossible to you because of your eschatology. It's a doom and gloom. I want Armageddon to come. Eschatology. What if Jesus doesn't come back for another 200 or 300 years? I'm okay with another great awakening. And I think there can be another great awakening. And if Israel, fake Israel, plays some kind of role in end times, you know what? They could die out and come back again later. We don't know. Either way, let's not support evil. And that's exactly what we're doing. We've thrown out blessed are the peacemakers and all these things, all in the name of Zionism. And even if you're not a Zionist, all in the name of let's just get Armageddon here. Let's just get everything over with. No, this is not right. Real people are going through real suffering. And eventually, if we're not careful, it might come in our own neighborhood. And we'll be thinking very differently then. And so I appreciate Pastor Baldwin coming and giving his perspective on these things. Love hearing what he has to say. Make sure you check out his channel. Be praying for him and his voice. I thought he sounded pretty good, and I'm thankful that that's doing better. But make sure you share this video. Let's get the word out about it. and let's help that next generation lose their Zionism. You don't have to be a left-wing libtard to be against Zionism. That's what the news media wants you to think. Too many people are getting their politics and practically their theology from Fox News, and that's why we call you people Fox News Baptists. You need to get over this. So anyway, great stuff, and thank you all for watching this with me. God bless. We'll see y'all next time.